They say the truth sets you free. But what they don't tell you is that some truths get stuck in your throat for 60 years. Buried so deep that you almost convince yourself they never happened. My name is Margaret, I am 77 years old, and for 6 decades I have carried a secret that has poisoned every day of my life. The secret of what Colonel James Hartford did to me when I was 15, 16, and 17 years old. How he used his uniform, his authority, and my silence to rape me repeatedly. This is not the story of a victim. This is the story of a woman who finally, at 77 years old, looked her rapist in the eye and said the words she should have been allowed to say 60 years ago. And what happened when I did will restore your faith that it's never too late to reclaim your voice. If you have ever been silenced about something that destroyed you, this story is for you. If you believe that survivors deserve to be heard, no matter how much time has passed, click the like button right now. Because what I'm about to tell you will deeply affect you. And please share this so that other survivors know they are not alone. Let me start with 6 months ago. Picture a quiet Saturday morning in a small town in Virginia. I was at the farmer's market, buying tomatoes and fresh bread like I do every weekend. I've lived in this town for 30 years, retired here after a career as a schoolteacher, known to everyone as Mrs. Brennan, the nice widow who volunteers at the library and always has butterscotch candies in her purse for the neighborhood children. I was paying for my vegetables when I heard a voice behind me. A man's voice, loud and jovial, saying, "Well, I'll be damned. Is that Margaret Sullivan? Little Margaret from Oakwood?" I froze. That name. My maiden name. Nobody in this town knows me as Margaret Sullivan. And Little Margaret from Oakwood is what he used to call me. I turned around slowly, and there he was. Colonel James Hartford. 89 years old now, using a cane, his military posture still evident despite his age, wearing a cap with his unit insignia. Smiling at me like we were old friends reunited. "My God, it is you," he said, moving closer. "I haven't seen you since you were what, 17? 18? You look wonderful. What are you doing in Richmond?" My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out right there in the farmer's market. This man, this monster, standing 3 feet away from me, acting like our shared history was something pleasant. Something normal. Have you ever come face to face with someone who hurt you and acted like nothing happened? Drop a comment and tell me, because what I did next surprised even me. Make sure you're subscribed because this confrontation is going to take you places you never expected. To understand what happened at that farmer's market and what I did in the months that followed, you need to understand who I was in 1962. I was 15 years old, living in Oakwood, Virginia, a military town built around Fort Henderson. My father had died 2 years earlier in a training accident. He'd been a sergeant. My mother was working 2 jobs trying to keep us afloat, me and my younger brother Danny. We lived in base housing, one of those identical small homes that line the streets near the commissary. I was a good girl. Straight A's, sang in the church choir, helped my mother with Danny, never got in trouble. I was also developing early, which I hated because it made me self-conscious. I wanted to be invisible. I wanted to just get through high school and maybe go to secretarial school and help my mother. Colonel James Hartford was 41 years old, decorated war hero from World War II in Korea, married with 3 children. He was the base commander's right hand, respected, admired, the kind of man who everyone deferred to. He had this way of speaking that made you feel important, like you mattered, like he saw something special in you. He knew my father, had served with him briefly. After my father died, the colonel made a point of checking in on us. He'd stop by our house, bring groceries, slip my mother some cash to help out. He'd ruffle Danny's hair and tell me I was growing up to be a beautiful young woman, and my father would be proud. My mother thought he was a godsend, a guardian angel sent by my father's memory. I thought so too. At first. It started so gradually I didn't even recognize what was happening. The colonel began offering me rides home from school. "Your mother works so hard," he'd say. "No need for you to walk in this heat." He'd pick me up in his personal car, not his military vehicle, and we'd drive the long way home. He'd ask me about my classes, my friends, my dreams. He made me feel seen in a way no adult had since my father died. Then came the compliments. "You're so mature for your age, Margaret. You're not like other girls, you're special. I can talk to you like an adult." He started touching my shoulder when he talked. Then my knee. Then my thigh. And every time, he'd watch my face carefully, gauging my reaction. Testing boundaries. I was 15 years old. I didn't have the language for what was happening. I just knew something felt wrong, but I also didn't want to seem ungrateful. This man was helping my family. My mother adored him. If I said something felt uncomfortable, would she believe me? Would she think I was being dramatic? Would she blame me for jeopardizing the help we desperately needed? So I stayed quiet, which is exactly what he was counting on. The touching escalated. He'd pull me close for hugs that lasted too long. He'd kiss my forehead, then my cheek, then the corner of my mouth. He started calling me during the day when my mother was at work. Long conversations where he'd tell me how beautiful I was becoming, how special, how much he thought about me. And then he'd say things like, "This is just between us, Margaret. You understand that, right? People wouldn't understand our special friendship. Our special friendship." That's what he called it. Even now, 60 years later, those words make my skin crawl. This is how predators operate. They isolate, they groom, they make you complicit in your own abuse. If this is bringing up difficult memories, please know you're not alone. Like this video if you understand how manipulation works. And keep watching because speaking this truth out loud is how we break the cycle. I was 15 years and 7 months old the first time Colonel James Hartford raped me. I remember the exact age because I'd just gotten my period for the 3rd time ever, and I was terrified about what was happening to my body. I hadn't been able to talk to my mother about it because she was so stressed and exhausted all the time. The colonel had offered to drive me to a dentist appointment. My mother was grateful because she couldn't take time off work. He picked me up from school, but instead of driving to the dentist, he drove to a motel on the outskirts of town. When I asked where we were going, he said, "I just need to stop somewhere first. Come on in with me, it'll just take a minute." I followed him. Because I trusted him. Because he was a respected military officer. Because I was a 15-year-old girl who had been raised to respect authority and do what adults told me to do. He had a room key already. We walked into that motel room, and he locked the door behind us. And the man who had been so kind, so paternal, so gentle, he disappeared. What took his place was something cold and methodical. He told me to sit on the bed. He told me I was special. He told me this was what people who cared about each other did. He told me I was mature enough to understand. And then he raped me. I won't give you every graphic detail because this isn't about sensationalizing trauma. But I need you to understand what rape actually means. It means your body is no longer yours. It means pain you can't adequately describe. It means your mind splitting off from your body because the only way to survive is to pretend you're somewhere else, anywhere else. It means bleeding and crying and begging someone to stop and having them ignore you completely. When it was over, he drove me to the dentist appointment like nothing had happened. He gave me $20 and told me to buy myself something nice. He reminded me that this was our special secret and that telling anyone would hurt my mother, would ruin my family, would destroy everything. And then he smiled at me in the rearview mirror and said, "Same time next week, little Margaret." That first rape wasn't an isolated incident. It was the beginning of 2 years of systematic sexual abuse. The colonel had created the perfect system. He'd established himself as our family benefactor, so my mother never questioned why he was spending time with me. He'd pick me up from school at least twice a week, always with some plausible excuse. A tutoring session, a mentorship program, a volunteer opportunity. And he'd take me to that motel, sometimes to his office on base after hours, once to his own home when his wife was away visiting family. He'd rape me, and then he'd drive me home or to wherever I was supposed to be, and I'd walk into my house and sit at the dinner table and pretend nothing was wrong. I learned to dissociate. That's the clinical term I learned decades later in therapy. During the abuse, I'd leave my body. I'd count ceiling tiles. I'd recite state capitals in my head. I'd imagine I was flying above the scene, watching it happen to someone else. My body was there, but I wasn't. It was the only way to survive. The physical damage was constant. Tearing, bleeding, infections that I couldn't explain or get treated. I lost weight. I stopped sleeping. My grades dropped. I quit the choir because I couldn't stand up in church and sing about God when I felt completely abandoned by any higher power. My mother thought I was just going through teenage rebellion. She had no idea her daughter was being systematically raped by the man she thought was saving us. I tried to tell her once. I was 16 and I'd just gotten my period early because of the trauma, and I was in so much pain I couldn't hide it anymore. I sat her down and I said, "Mom, the colonel, he's been..." And she cut me off. "Margaret, that man has been a blessing to this family. I don't want to hear you speak ill of him. Whatever teenage drama you think is happening, you need to get over it. We need him. We need him." Those 3 words sealed my silence for the next year. This is why so many survivors stay silent. Because we're not believed. Because we're told we're dramatic. Because the predator has positioned themselves as indispensable. If you believe survivors, if you've ever been that survivor, please comment below. Your voice matters. And hit that subscribe button because what comes next is how I survived. The abuse finally stopped 3 weeks after I turned 17. Not because anyone intervened. Not because the colonel suddenly developed a conscience. But because I did something that terrified me more than the abuse itself. I got pregnant. I missed my period. Then missed another. I was throwing up every morning, exhausted all the time, and my body was changing in ways I couldn't hide. I knew what it meant, and I knew that if my mother found out, if anyone found out, my life was over. Pregnant teenage girls in 1964 were sent away to homes for unwed mothers. They were shamed, expelled from school, disowned by families. I told the colonel. I thought maybe it would make him stop. Maybe he'd be scared enough of the consequences that he'd leave me alone. I was so naive. He drove me to a doctor 2 towns over. A doctor who asked no questions and performed an abortion in a back room for cash. It was illegal, dangerous, and excruciating. I hemorrhaged afterward. I almost died. The colonel drove me home and told my mother I had food poisoning. She believed him. But something in me broke that day. Or maybe something in me finally hardened enough to become unbreakable. I realized that the colonel would never stop. That he'd keep using me until I was used up completely. That if I wanted to survive, I had to leave. 3 weeks later, on the day I graduated high school, I took the money I'd been secretly saving from a part-time job at the library, I left a note for my mother and Danny, and I got on a bus to Richmond. I never went back to Oakwood. I never spoke to Colonel James Hartford again, until 60 years later at that farmer's market. The years that followed my escape were about survival, not living. I got a job as a waitress in Richmond. I rented a tiny room in a boarding house. I changed my name from Sullivan to Brennan when I got married at 23 to a kind man named Robert, who never knew the full story of my past. I told him I'd had a difficult childhood and left it at that. Robert and I had 2 children. I was a good mother, maybe overprotective, definitely hypervigilant about who was around my daughters. I became a teacher because I wanted to be the adult who noticed when something was wrong with a child, who created a safe space for them to speak. I spent 35 years teaching elementary school, and I like to think I helped some children who were going through what I'd gone through. But I was never fully present. Part of me was always back in that motel room. Always 15 years old and trapped. I had nightmares several times a week. I couldn't stand being touched certain ways. I'd panic if a man in uniform walked past me. I developed elaborate rituals to feel safe, constantly checking locks, avoiding certain streets, never, ever going near military bases. Robert died 7 years ago. Heart attack, sudden and devastating. My daughters are grown with families of their own, living in different states. I retired. I became the quiet widow who volunteers in gardens and seems perfectly content. And every single day, I carried the secret of what Colonel James Hartford did to me. I never reported it, never spoke his name out loud, never sought justice. Because what justice was there for something that happened 60 years ago? Because I'd convinced myself I was over it, that it didn't matter anymore, that dredging it all up would only hurt me more. And then I saw him at that farmer's market, smiling at me like we were old friends. I didn't speak to the colonel that day at the market. I grabbed my bags and left without saying a word. I drove home shaking so badly I had to pull over twice. I spent that night vomiting from the stress, my body remembering trauma my mind had tried to bury. For weeks I was a wreck. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. The nightmares came back worse than ever. I'd be transported back to being 15, helpless, terrified. I started having panic attacks in public. I stopped going to the farmer's market. I stopped leaving my house. My daughter Sarah called one Sunday and immediately knew something was wrong. "Mom, what's going on? You sound terrible." And something in me broke. I started crying, really crying, for the first time in decades. And I told her. I told her everything. About the colonel, about the abuse, about the pregnancy and the abortion and the 60 years of silence. Sarah was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she said, "Mom, you need to confront him. Not for justice, not for punishment, but for you. You need to look him in the eye and tell him what he did to you. You need to take your voice back." The idea terrified me. What would be the point? He was 89 years old. The statute of limitations had long passed. Even if I reported it, nothing would happen. He'd just deny it. And I'd be the hysterical old woman making accusations against a decorated war hero. But Sarah was right about one thing. I needed to speak the truth out loud. To him. I needed him to hear it. I needed to stop carrying his secret for him. So I found him. It wasn't hard. Small town, and he was well known. Colonel James Hartford, retired, living in a modest house on the west side of Richmond. Widowed 3 years ago. 3 children, 7 grandchildren, active in his church and the veterans of foreign wars. A pillar of the community. A respected elder. A rapist. This is the moment everything changes. If you need to know what happened when I confronted him, make sure you're subscribed. And tell me in the comments, is confronting your abuser healing or harmful? Because what I discovered will surprise you. I showed up at his house on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd written and rewritten what I wanted to say 100 times. I'd practiced in front of the mirror. I'd called Sarah 3 times that morning, almost backing out. But I got in my car, I drove to his address, and I knocked on his door. He answered wearing reading glasses and a cardigan, looking like someone's harmless grandfather. When he saw me, his face lit up with recognition. "Margaret, what a wonderful surprise. Come in, come in." I didn't move. "I'm not here for a social visit, James." It was the first time I'd ever called him by his first name. For 2 years, he'd made me call him Colonel, or Sir, even while he was raping me. Using his first name felt like the smallest reclamation of power. His smile faltered slightly. "Is everything all right?" "No," I said. My voice was steady. I'd expected to be shaking, crying, falling apart. But I felt strangely calm. Cold even. "Everything is not all right. And you know exactly why." He looked confused, or he was pretending to be confused. "Margaret, I'm not sure what you raped me," I said. Clear, direct, loud enough that if any of his neighbors were outside, they'd hear. "From the time I was 15 years old until I was 17. You systematically raped me. Multiple times a week for 2 years. And you knew exactly what you were doing." The confusion dropped from his face. What replaced it wasn't guilt or shame. It was calculation. He was assessing the threat. "Margaret, I think you're misremembering." "Don't you dare," I said, and my voice rose. "Don't you dare tell me I'm misremembering. I remember every single time. I remember that motel on Route 7. I remember your office with the green filing cabinet. I remember the smell of your cologne. I remember you telling me it was our special secret. I remember the abortion you forced me to have when I got pregnant at 16. I remember. Everything." He glanced around, worried now about who might overhear. "Perhaps you should come inside so we can discuss this privately." "No. I'm never going to be alone with you again. I'm going to say what I came here to say, and then I'm going to leave." We stood on his front porch, this 89-year-old man and this 77-year-old woman, separated by 60 years and a chasm of unpaid debt. And I told him everything. Not for his benefit, but for mine. I told him about the nightmares, about the decades of therapy, about the panic attacks and the hypervigilance and the inability to trust men. I told him about the ways the abuse had poisoned my marriage, my relationship with my daughters when they were young, and I was too afraid to let them out of my sight. I told him about the shame I'd carried, the belief that somehow I'd been complicit, that I'd done something to deserve it. "You destroyed my childhood," I said. "You destroyed my sense of safety in the world. You made me believe that my body wasn't mine, that I existed for men to use. You made me afraid of my own shadow for 60 years. He tried several times to interrupt, to minimize, to reframe. "Margaret, I cared about you. I thought we had a relationship." I cut him off. I was 15 years old. There is no relationship between a 41-year-old man and a 15-year-old girl. There is only abuse. There is only rape. It was a different time, he tried. People didn't. Rape was illegal in 1962 too, James. Statutory rape. Child abuse. It was all illegal. You just knew you could get away with it because I was poor and vulnerable, and you were powerful. I watched his face cycle through emotions. Defensiveness. Anger. Fear. And finally, something that might have been guilt, though I suspect it was more regret at being caught than remorse for what he'd done. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked. His voice was small, elderly, nothing like the commanding tone he'd used when he was raping me. "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing you can give me that would make this right. I just needed you to hear me say it out loud. To know that I didn't forget. That I didn't forgive. That what you did matters. This is what taking your voice back looks like. It's not pretty, it's not wrapped in a bow, but it's powerful. If this is resonating with you, drop a like. And stay with me because his response will tell you everything you need to know about predators and accountability." He didn't apologize. "Not really." He said, "I'm sorry you felt hurt. Not I'm sorry I hurt you. Not I'm sorry I raped you repeatedly for 2 years. He made it about my feelings, my interpretation, as if the facts were somehow debatable. I didn't expect anything different. Predators don't suddenly become accountable in their old age. They just become old predators. But something happened for me in that moment. Standing on his porch, saying out loud what he'd done to me, seeing him squirm and deflect and minimize, it broke something loose inside me. The secret I'd been carrying for 60 years, the weight of it, it started to lift. I told him one more thing before I left. You're going to die soon, James. You're 89 years old. Maybe you have a year, maybe 5 if you're lucky. And when you die, people will come to your funeral and talk about what a great man you were. What a hero. What a dedicated soldier and family man. And I'm going to know the truth. I'm going to know that you were a rapist who preyed on a vulnerable child. And that truth can't be buried with you because I'm speaking it now. I walked back to my car. He called after me, something about not wanting any trouble, about his family, about his reputation. I didn't turn around. I drove home and I called Sarah and I told her I'd done it. And she said something I'll never forget. Mom, I'm so proud of you. You were brave at 15 when you survived him. And you're brave now at 77 for refusing to let him have the last word. It's been 6 months since that confrontation. The colonel is still alive as far as I know. I haven't seen him again, and I don't need to. I said what I needed to say. I took back what was mine, my story, my truth, my voice. I wish I could tell you that confronting him healed everything, that I'm magically free of trauma now. But healing doesn't work that way. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still carry the scars of what he did to me. But they feel different now. Lighter somehow. I've started speaking to other survivors. There's a support group for elderly women who were abused as children, and I've been sharing my story there. And what I've learned is that I'm not alone. That there are thousands, maybe millions of us who carried secrets for decades because we didn't think we'd be believed. But I also learned that it's never too late to speak. Never too late to confront. Never too late to refuse to carry their shame for them anymore. I'm 77 years old. I survived Colonel James Hartford's abuse. I survived 60 years of silence. And now I'm surviving into my truth. That's not nothing. That's everything. Thank you for bearing witness to my story. If you're a survivor of abuse, no matter how long ago it happened, please know, your story matters. Your truth matters. You matter. Like, comment, and subscribe to help other survivors find this message. And remember, speaking your truth is the bravest thing you can do.